What are you at? It's Paul from Wicked Acorn. How's everybody doing? Let's turn on the chat and see who's here. Richard Ainsworth is here. That's great. Uh, Rick, tonight we're going to get to hear the missus. This is the video that Anne, Rick's wife, Anne, did some voiceover work for me. And this is a story I've been really tortured by. Um, it's a difficult topic. It's about an execution, so it's a difficult topic to start with. But it's about a transgender man, born as a woman, born as a female, and became a man in the 1940s in Greater Manchester. Would you believe? And it's a difficult subject to talk about because it's so there's so much hatred around this subject, and it's very unfair. There you go. It's near the end, so we'll hopefully Anne can hang in there for the for her debut on my channel. Anne has been cameoed on Rick's channel many times and shows up in Rick's videos. Uh, Keep your eye out for her. She's always there somewhere. Uh, so in a place called Rottenstall, strange name. It's not a big place. It's not a big place in. Is it in Greater Manchester? It's in Lancashire. It's north of Manchester. Um, I don't know if it's actually part of Greater Manchester. As I said in the description teaser leading up to doing this tonight, because today is the anniversary of his execution, and yeah, what is it? January 12th, 1949. She was executed at Strangeways Prison, and you see, it's really difficult for me to talk about this uh, because I'm an older generation, and this really wasn't part of our growing up. Transgender was not really a thing that was on our radar. It was something. Good evening, 1 2 3 4. It wasn't something we. It wasn't something that was on our radar. It wasn't something we talked about. Uh, Homosexuality was the thing in our generation that was the controversial subject. Everybody was that was the common put down to call your mates gay. So that was the thing in our generation. Transgender was really not something we heard about a lot. We knew it existed. I mean, Lou Rawls with the not Lou Rawls, Lou Reed with the take a walk on the wild side. So it was something that existed, but it wasn't something that I was fully aware of, shall we say. And now it's a buzzword, isn't it? Anyway, the poor guy, girl. That's what I mean. I don't have the language to talk about this. It's and that was part of the reason my computer went to sleep. That was part of the reason that it was so difficult to do this, because I was working on the video down here, and my daughter was upstairs listening to me edit this video and put it together, and she said, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that. Things I was saying, and I'm like, why? What's wrong with that? And she's like, oh, this. So it's just not something I'm sensitive to, but I'm sensitive enough to know that I'm not sensitive enough to it. Anyway, I'll start the video up and I'll interrupt it from time to time. because the video isn't finished. I never did finish it. It's the story of the execution of Margaret Bill Allen, and it happened on this day in history in 1949, I think. So let's get the video rolling, and I'll chime in from time to time. This is the story of Margaret Bill Allen, a transgender man who brutally murdered his friend in what he called one of his funny turns. Margaret Bill Allen was one of the first women to be executed at Manchester's Strangeways prison, and probably the first openly transgender person in the world to be executed. The first thing we have to address here is that name, Strangeways. Otherwise, this story sounds completely made up, or you might get... So, of course, that part of the introduction there is for anyone outside of Manchester has never heard of Strangeways prison. So we have to explain things to the rest of the world too. I mean, I never heard of Strangeways prison before I moved to this country, so we do have to explain things. The first thing we have to address here is that name, Strangeways. Otherwise, this story sounds completely made up, or you might get the wrong idea about Manchester. It's not some kind of undesirables death camp for those with strange ways. That really is the name of the prison, or at least it used to be. It's officially HMP Manchester now. It's definitely not a place you would want to stay for an extended period of time, but maybe it is considering the alternative that happens in this story. Anyway, it's still commonly referred to as Strangeways. It's named after a park that was on the site. It comes from the Anglo-Saxon strang goways, meaning a place by a stream with a strong current. It was designed by Alfred Waterhouse and completed in 1869. It has a fairy tale castle look to it, but there is something sinister about it too. 100 executions have taken place here. You know, I'm really hesitant to make this video. Transgender is not something we talk about here a lot, but it did come up in a video we did a while ago about Sarah Roberts Taylor, the Manchester woman who disguised herself as a man to fight Napoleon. We just make little history videos, and part of our agenda is to fill the calendar with things that happened on this day in Greater Manchester history. And that's what this is. On the 12th of January, 1949, Margaret Bill Allen was led to the gallows. Now, there's not a lot known about Margaret Allen's early life. Not unusual considering she was the 20th child out of 22. Born in Rawtenstall, Lancashire in 1906, she was said to be a bit of a tomboy as a child, and by her 20s, she took to dressing and behaving like a man. She hung out with men, drank with them at the pub, and did all the things working-class northern men would do at the time. In 1935, Margaret made a visit to St. Mary's Hospital. St. Mary's was founded by our old friend Dr. Charles White as a laying-in hospital, and to this day it specializes in treating women and children. When Margaret left St. Mary's, she told people she had a sex change operation and would now only answer to Bill. Now it seems highly... So I haven't looked into that part of the story in any great depth, and it's difficult to do such a thing because it's medical records, right? Uh, but the first, I'm about to tell that part of the story. Uh, female to male sex changes. The first one was in 1949, I think. So it's unlikely that she did have a sex change at St. Mary's in whatever year I just said, it before 1949. So it's highly unlikely that she had a sex change operation at that early date.
And would now only answer to Bill. Now, it seems highly unlikely that any such gender affirming procedures were available at St. Mary's in 1935. Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Research, founded in pre Nazi Germany in 1919, performed male to female surgery, but female to male surgeries would not be practiced until the late 1940s. Hirschfeld's institute was destroyed by the Nazis with one of the first and largest book burnings. But the fact that such a procedure was known to Margaret Allen is quite interesting.
So history rhymes and repeats itself and all that. Uh, that was the first book burning, and that was one of the first places that the Nazis cracked down on was this Institute for Sexual Health that Hirschfeld started in Berlin, I think it was. Um, yeah, the more things change, right?
But the fact that such a procedure was known to Margaret Allen is quite interesting. At any rate, for the remainder of this story, Margaret will be known as Bill. So now we're getting into the war years. Bill was still legally a woman and, of course, wouldn't be called up. But at this time in history, women began to take over jobs that were the traditional territory of men only. Bill worked alongside men as a laborer, loading coal, a painter, and a postman. And from 1942 to 1946, Bill worked as a conductor on the buses, the happiest days of his life. Not only was he allowed to wear trousers, it was part of the uniform.
So this is an interesting part of the story that I didn't really nail home uh, in this unfinished version, but he, she, Bill, this was the happiest days of her life, his life. He, see, I don't have the language for this. It's really difficult for me to just turn that off and on. Um, it was really difficult for him to uh, blend into society. But when he was working on the buses, he enjoyed life. He had a good life. And as you'll hear, he gets laid off, let go uh, for abusing passengers, apparently. And he did have a lot of medical and uh, mental issues. And obviously, he murdered his friend. But this loss of his job really made things really bad for him.
He allowed to wear trousers, it was part of the uniform. But in 1946, the war was over and Bill was let go by the bus corporation. One account says for theft, but most seem to say for being abusive to passengers. Now, I can't help but think he was let go because a woman's place, especially a strange one who dressed and acted like a man, a woman's place was not in a man's job any longer. Many women had to leave the workplace when the men returned from the war.
Now, as you can imagine, Bill didn't have many friends. It seems he only had two. His closest and only real friend was Annie Cook, a pretty 30-year-old divorcee. It's quite possible they were more than friends.
On a holiday in Blackpool, they checked in under the name of Mr. and Mrs. Allen. Now, Annie would later deny these allegations. Lesbianism was not technically illegal, but it certainly wasn't accepted. There's an interesting.
So that is some AI generated video, and it's unfortunate it didn't turn out so good. Um, so there is some AI in this video, and uh, I unashamedly use it and announce it as so. Um, I think it's great. Um, it's unfortunate. I've since learned to do this better. It's one of those as as we say, shit in, shit out. So if you don't put good information in, you don't get good information out. And the there's only the one photo of Annie, so it can't generate a good image of her because it doesn't have a good image of her to start with. Uh, but I've since learned how to make a better image using AI. And I'll show you at the end of this, you'll see uh, a photo I just recently did of Bill. And it's a much better photo. So if I use that, I'll get better video from a better still.
Technically illegal, but it certainly wasn't accepted. There's an interesting story about the legality of lesbianism. It's said that the 1885 act that made homosexual activity between men illegal originally contained provisions regarding the relations between women as well. Now, according to the myth, Queen Victoria refused to sign the bill because women do not do such things. Like most of these urban myths or conspiracy theories, as we call them today, it's simply not true. She could have vetoed the whole bill, but not amend it. And there would be records of such an event if it were true. Even in Victoria's time, it had been a long time since a sovereign refused to sign or give assent to a bill. Bill did have another friend, or at least someone he was friendly with, Nancy Ellen Chadwick. Nancy was a bit of an eccentric herself. She was working class like Bill, but she had been left some properties by a former employer, so she did have a bit of money and a good income. Now, despite that, she dressed shabbily and was always seen wandering about town. Everyone knew her as Old Nancy, and she was known.
I really wanted to play Rocky Raccoon there, but everyone knew her as Nancy. Uh, I don't go into much detail about Nancy in this version. There's lots more to tell about her, and as I said in the intro, this video was unfinished. Um, she was like a maid, live-in servant, or whatever you call that, for this guy. Um, I think he was a mill owner. It's a long time since I looked at this story, so the details are a bit fuzzy because I haven't said them, so I don't. That's part of my remembering these things is saying them into camera. Um, so it's a bit fuzzy. I think he was a mill owner, and when he died, he left in his will property to his maid or whatever she was, and she rented that property, and that was her income. So she had a steady income, and I think he left her a bit of money as well. Uh, but she was a strange character. She was the kind of lady, you know, you'd see sitting on a park bench talking to the pigeons all day. And she wasn't well liked in the community. Um, she was a strange character. You can imagine the type, somebody that sits on a park bench talking to themselves and talking to the pigeons and cursing at people as they go by. that type. You know the type, right? That was uh, that was the type of person she was. But Bill was a friend of hers. I can imagine Bill not having many friends himself, uh, walking along and made friends with her, and they were they were pretty good friends. And it's not this part is not covered in the story, but he went to her house one day, showed up at her house to borrow a cup of sugar, and he went in and had tea with her, and she gave him the cup of sugar. And as he was days later, he was walking along, and she asked him for the cup of sugar, and he said, "I'll have it tomorrow." One of these kind of stories. So I think he was kind of avoiding her because he didn't have the sugar to give back to her. "I'll give it to you tomorrow." Um, she shows up at his house, banging on the door, asking for the cup of sugar, and the story ensues. There's a lot more to this story that I didn't cover here.
About town. Everyone knew her as Old Nancy, and she was known to always carry a considerable amount of money in her purse. Out of work, his parents were dead, estranged from all 21 of his siblings, deeply in debt, not eating properly, going through menopause, experiencing health issues, headaches, dizzy spells, depression. On top of all that, viewed as a freak by the world, Bill took to the drink and on more than one occasion attempted suicide.
I'll tell you all about it. The other statements I gave you were wrong. As I was saying, I was coming out of the house on Saturday last about 9:20 in the morning when Mrs. Chadwick came round the corner. She asked if this was where I lived and could she come in. I told her I was going out. I was in a funny mood and she seemed to get on my nerves, although she hadn't said anything. I said I would have to go as I was going out and could she see me sometime else. But she seemed somehow to insist on coming in. I just looked round and saw a hammer in the kitchen. This time we were talking just inside the kitchen with the front door closed. On the spur of the moment, I hit her with the hammer. She gave a shout that seemed to start me off more. I hit her a few times, but I don't know how many. I then pulled the body into my coal house. I've told you where I was all day. That part is true, and true that I went to bed at 10 to 11. When I awoke, the thought of what was downstairs made me stay awake. I went downstairs but couldn't tell the time as all the clocks are broke. There were no lights in the road and I couldn't hear any footsteps. My intention was to pull her into the river and dispose of the body, but she was too heavy and I just put the body in the road. Later I heard the noise outside and knew they had found her. I looked out of the window and saw the bus. Then I went back to sleep. Just before I put the body out, I went round the corner and threw the bag into the river. The bag I sort of dropped in. The hammerhead I hit her with I threw some distance up the river, and the handle I used for the fire. I looked in the bag but there was no money in it. I didn't actually kill her for that. I had one of my funny turns. I had no reason to do it at all. It just seemed to come over me. The noise after the first hit seemed to set me off.
So that's where the video ends. It's a really strange story. It's a crime of passion. This is the photo I got AI to make of Bill. So a much better photo, so I can use that to create better videos. Um, and I didn't do it for Nancy at this point in time. So the video of Nancy is not very good. Uh, so yeah, it's a a crime of passion, it seems. She had no reason to kill Mrs. Chadwick. Uh, just seems the guy was a bit unstable and just did in his friend. I guess they got into an argument or whatever the case may be. You heard her account. So she intended to dump the body in the Irwell, which is right across the road from her house, and dragged her out, and couldn't do it for whatever reason, too heavy, as she said, and left the body in the middle of the road. Just very strange. And of course, the bus comes along, finds the body right outside, right outside the front, his front door. Uh, Suspect number one, right, or question number one. The police knock on Bill's door, and you know, did you see anything? Did you hear anything? He gave a couple of statements before the one you just heard, completely fabricated, made up stories that he hadn't seen her and all kinds of things like that. Uh, and yeah, so she threw her purse in the river and threw the hammerhead up the river. And the hammerhead is still there to this day. It was never found. So if it was indeed thrown in the Irwell, it hasn't been retrieved or knowingly retrieved. They searched for it but didn't find it. So Bill was brought to court and tried for the murder. He confessed. He was tried for the murder, found guilty. They tried a plea of insanity, but it didn't work. He was examined by psychiatrists, I guess, and found to be competent. And there was a petition, uh, sentenced to death, of course. There was a petition to um, stay the execution, like have a life sentence or whatever instead. And there's 300 signatures, I believe, and he was able to collect for to put off the execution, um, but it was rejected, and the execution was planned for this day in history. And so Annie would go visit Bill at Strange Ways, and um, he was in pretty good spirits, and he told her he didn't want Annie to come to the execution or to be outside Strange Ways when it took place. And he said, I want you to go and stand on the corner where we met. And I can't remember the name of the street, but that was the intention. And that's what Annie did. She stood on the corner where they met as the execution took place. And again, our old friend Albert Pierpont was the executioner uh, from Oldham. He owned a pub in Oldham. I think it's Oldham. Pretty sure it's Oldham. And he was the most famous executioner in British history. And he owned a pub there. Something Bells. I don't recall. It was in one of the recent live streams we talked about it. Um, yeah, so it's a strange story, a strange, sad story, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if I'll ever put it out as a video. Um, it's a very sad, sad tale. And that's what uh, that's what happened on this day in history on January 12th, 1949. And there you go. Everybody's pretty silent in the chat. There's not much you can say about this, is there? It's a sad story, and it's one I don't know what to say about it myself. It's a very sad story that that took place there, and Mrs. Chadwick's funeral uh, took place a few days later after her death, of course, and there was hardly anyone at her funeral. Just a couple of people went to her funeral. I thought that was funny. Deaf aid. Do you guys still call hearing aids deaf aids? We don't call them deaf aids, but I always remembered it from the Beatles' "Let It Be" album. Um, what's that song? Can't remember. I think it's Two of Us. It's the intro to Two of Us on the "Let It Be" album. John Lennon says, "What is it? I Dig a Pony by Charles Hawtrey and the Deaf Aids. Phase 1, in which Doris gets her oats." Deaf aids. It's not a word I'm familiar with at all. So we don't call them deaf aids, never did. They were always called hearing aids. But that's the world's smallest deaf aid back in 1949. Um, so there you go. That's all I have to say about that. Um, it may be a video at some point in time. My daughter weirded me out doing this video. You shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that. So there's a lot more to the story that I've cut out. So there you go. That's this day in history, and I just thought I would acknowledge it. And there you go. Time to make the donuts. See you in the next one.